In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the walkthrough edition of the X's and Argos podcast, brought to you by Funny Bone Broth. My name is Ben Grant, joined as always by JB. We are previewing the Winnipeg Blue Bombers versus the Toronto Argonauts, part 2. JB, you texted me earlier in the week and you said that you thought this was a really big game. I'm not sure I'm on the same page as you are. Walk me through it. Why is this so big for you?
I think it's big for a couple of reasons. I think, number one, you never want to get below 500. So I think that's always a goal to keep, is you want to try and keep above 500. Yeah, it's the home opener. I think that's a huge tone-setting game. We want home field to be a place where teams do not feel comfortable, where the Argos feel comfortable, feel confident that they're going to be able to get the win. And it's a test for the coaching staff because they have the opportunity to try and dissect Winnipeg and play them a week later. How many improvements can they make? I think it's really crucial to see which team comes out better prepared. I really feel like it's going to be an incredible coaching showdown between the two teams to see who could make the adjustments and who was able to analyze the film more successfully.
I certainly agree with you on that part. I think this is a really big test for the coaching staff. Like if the Blue Bombers come in and just hammer the Argonauts and have been able to adjust to things that the Argonauts weren't ready for, the Argonauts' adjustments are either ineffective or not apparent. Like obviously those things that's a big problem if that's what we see. I'm talking about it more in terms of wins and losses because I look at this as Winnipeg right now is the best team in the CFL. I don't know if they're going to end the season that way. I don't actually think so, but at the moment, you can't really argue against Winnipeg being the best team in the CFL. So losing to them in consecutive weeks early in the year for a new team, to me, that's not really a big problem. Like I look, down the road at Hamilton, I wouldn't be panicking if I were Hamilton. They lost to Winnipeg, who are a great team, and then they lost to Saskatchewan, who might be the second best team in the CFL at this point. And both of those games were on the road. So I don't think the Tiger Cats are that worried. I don't think Coach Steinhauer is panicking in Hamilton. And for those same reasons, I don't think anyone should be panicking here if the Argonauts happen to lose back-to-back games, because it's the Blue Bombers. It's not the same as losing back-to-back games to almost anyone else.
No, I agree, but I think if you look at the first 8 games that the Argos have, and ideally we're coming out of that 4-4, I think that this is a really important game. I think you have the back-to-backs with Hamilton, you have Saskatchewan in there. Edmonton doesn't look like they're going full bore right now, but I really think that this win is crucial if we want to get to 4-4. At the end of 8 games. So, I really feel like that they should be putting a lot of priority on this. I don't think it's just another loss.
Yeah, if we're talking about it just in terms of those first 8 and trying to stay even, then yeah, of course you don't want to end up below 500 like you said before, and of course losing this week would put a lot of pressure on the Argonauts for that Edmonton game, a game that they should win, but man, there's going to be a lot of pressure because the pressure to fall to 1-3.
If we don't come up with a win this week, I thought this week was a big week. That will definitely amp up next week into an incredibly big deal.
Yeah, I actually don't really want that feeling. I'm not. You shouldn't feel like that by week 3 and 4 shouldn't be as stressful. But that's the thing about this shortened season is that we're already feeling the stress of the playoff crunch. Like the stress that you would normally feel at this time of year is already in motion. And this is something that, normally by game 3, what would we be like, mid-July, and, everyone's still relaxed, still trying to figure things out. And here we are, we're talking about playoff positioning and, this is, a must-win game. Like imagine talking about like a must-win game in mid-July for the CFL, but it feels like that's where we are right now. Let's talk about some of the concerns that fans had this week. I got a lot of questions on Twitter and DMs about player injuries, how things looked in practice. I want to go over a couple of the things that I saw this week and a couple of things that were said. So first of all, before we get to injuries, there was a lot of urgency in practice this week. It was mostly coming from the coaches. The players seemed it's an intense group naturally. The defense especially, they're always intense out there. They're on each other. They joke around a lot too, but there's a lot of talking and they never really lose that fire. But the urgency that I felt this week was coming from the coaching staff. They were really stressing to get things done. Practices in the CFL are always very efficient. You don't have a lot of downtime. There's a lot of moving around. Everything's timed out. But this week felt even more like that. During special teams periods where sometimes there might not be much to do for one particular positional group, coaches were always working. They'd gather one or two guys, say, okay, you two guys come over here, let's work on this while field goal is working. And okay, you're not on this scout team, well then come over here, let's fix this. And it was constant this week. So that sense of urgency combined with so much install really struck me as different this week. Why do you think all that's been going on, JB?
Well, I mean, maybe the Argo coaching staff agrees with me about the importance of this game. I think the home opener is always a big one. I think you really want to kind of show out for your home opener. I think it's probably a positive too that they looked at that Winnipeg game and felt pretty good, despite the score, felt pretty good about how they competed and that they aren't fixing fundamental problems, but that they're ready to really start installing some more complexity. And that's what I would take it to be, is like, okay, now let's really try and ramp up the looks that we can give, because we've got the basics down.
Coach Dinwiddie was asked about that today, actually, about how much new stuff teams typically will put in a back-to-back, and if there's any truth to the idea that teams hold back on half of their arsenal to then unload it in the second half of that doubleheader. He said it's not typical when it's a shorter week, so one of those like Labor Day doubleheaders where you've only got maybe 3 or 4 days in between games, and we know we've got a couple of those things coming up, but in this type of doubleheader, he says it is, it's like a totally different game, because you've had with the extended week this week, with a full sort of 7 days to think about, to install, to change things up, to really analyze. So he kind of suggested this is going to be a very different looking game, and he anticipated that to be the truth for Winnipeg as well as the Toronto Argonauts. And the other thing you mentioned with it being the first home game, that's on everyone's minds. Coach Dinwiddie was very quick to talk about the excitement that the players are feeling. He's also got some excitement there too. He talked about the fact that his wife and kids are going to be, I think he said just the first half because they've got an early bedtime, but it being an early game, they can at least watch some of it. But it's an exciting thing for so many of these local GTA guys, a lot of them playing in front of friends and family for the first time. Guys like Sam Achampong and all of the Mississauga guys, Brissett. It's too bad that a couple of those guys are banged up right now, but there is going to be a pretty cool environment. And Dejan Allen talked to the media today as well. He was also kind of reflecting that excitement. Just starting the season with 2 straight road games, there's something nice to playing on your home field. But that's the next thing I wanted to talk about with you is this really a home field? One thing that bothers me a little bit, and I was thinking about it this week when I was watching practice, the team's practicing on turf. I don't think they've had any grass practices since Guelph, where they had a few mixed in on the soccer fields there at Guelph. And yet they play on a grass field at BMO. Doesn't that strike you as a little bit odd, or something they really should be taking advantage of?
Yeah, I mean, it's not ideal. You'd like to be able to practice on the turf that you play on, because it changes your timing. It really changes a lot about your game. But I'm not sure what else you can do. We are, the Argos are guests at BMO in a sense. I mean, it was built for TFC, so I think that there's always a balance there. Between being able to play there, being able to practice there. But I do think as they become a regular tenant at BMO, that's probably something that needs to be looked into in terms of being able to practice on the field as well.
And it's not that there aren't grass fields around, but you can't just send a professional football team out to practice on any grass field. It's dangerous. You're going to get people hurt. It's not, there's so many, even like the best field that you can think of right now. You say, oh, you know what, this school over here has a really nice field. It doesn't, not compared to the standards that professional fields are held to. You'd have to go, I can't even think of where the closest grass field would be that would be of acceptable condition, like maybe having to drive out to Appleby College or something like that to get a perfectly flat, well-groomed field that is going to play the way that BMO will. So, it's not really a good answer. I don't have a solution. I just wish it were something, because that was something that I always felt, I felt for years that Edmonton had that advantage playing on grass. That everyone else had to come in there playing on turf, and especially that old turf back in the AstroTurf days. It was suddenly like playing in space or in water, and it was such a huge advantage to the home team. And I wish that was something the Argos could really exploit. But I think they're going to feel just as strange as everyone else does. And for that matter, I don't even know what everyone else's practice situations are. Maybe the other teams in the CFL do have access to grass fields. So maybe this is a disadvantage. I don't even know that. That's something I'd like to look into, actually. There were a lot of injury concerns this week. And I think a lot of this comes out of the fact that injury reports are now being made public. And people don't know. I think people aren't necessarily used to just how many injuries there are throughout the course of the season. Let me assure you, most of the injuries that you saw on the injury reports this week, it's not that they're not real. They are real injuries. But these are things that are going to happen every week. There are going to be weeks where there's 15 to 20 guys on that injury report, because that's the nature of football. The team is going to be hurt for most of the season. Hopefully not injured, but certainly hurt. And so guys like Enoch Mwamba has been out. He'll be fine. He'll play. Philip Blake, I'm a little more nervous about because I think he's got 4 straight days now with not practicing. I think he's going to play though as well. Just kind of watching him move around. It's his shoulder. It's still the same issue that goes back to Calgary, and he was able to go back into the game in Calgary. He was able to play last week, even at left tackle. So I expect Philip Blake to play. I just think they were trying to not put any more strain on him. They know he's got it down. There's nothing you're going to teach Philip Blake probably at this point. So they just wanted to shut him down. And Charleston Hughes has been out. I expect him to play. John White, no reason to think he's not going to play. Dejon Allen seems like he's going to play as well. He's clearly in pain, but he's moving pretty well. And he was back to pretty much full today. So that's obviously a good sign. I expect him to start at left tackle. I do think that the concern between Allen and Blake may lead to us finding Terry Poole on the depth chart, finding him active, just because they showed last week that they weren't ready to put Dylan Giffen or Shane Richards in at left tackle. Remember, they moved Philip Blake there from center, which is also not his position. Poor Philip Blake, who is just begging to play guard where he's awesome, and instead is having to play everywhere else. But I think with those two guys being banged up, they don't want to risk something like what if on the third play of the game, Allen, his knee's not responding well, can't make it. Blake's already hobbled a little bit. It's just not a situation you want to be in. So I wonder if something like that might happen. I'm not sure about Coney Ely. That he spent a lot of time doing rehab work, and I don't know how close he's going to be. They said that was going to be a game time decision. That's not one that I would bet on. And Jawan Breskison's going to be out still for a few more weeks. But I think everyone else, Eli Mensah, I'm also not 100% on, but I think everyone else, I think they're going to give it a go. So the injuries probably aren't as big a concern as they may have seemed from all the panicked DMs that I was getting throughout the week. Let's move into a segment that we're going to call OCDC. JB, you've been a defensive coordinator for a long time. I've been an offensive coordinator for a long time. Let's role play a little bit and kind of play those roles for both the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the Toronto Argonauts. So let's start with the visiting Blue Bombers. I'll kind of give you what I would do as their offensive coordinator, and you give me what you would do as their defensive coordinator, and then we'll do Toronto. So for Winnipeg, if I'm the OC of the Blue Bombers coming in this week, I probably went into last week not anticipating there being as much cover zero as we saw, as much man coverage as we saw. And I probably went into last week thinking that we could run the ball. And notice, of course, last week they shut that down. They didn't even really try to run that much they did it very late in the game just to keep the clock moving, but they had essentially abandoned the run game once they saw that Toronto was willing to overcommit to the run. The problem is they didn't have that much stuff in that is man specific. And so I think that would be my plan this week is, again, open with the ground game. That's going to be the plan, is trying to run the ball, because Winnipeg, that's their identity. That's their team. And I think they're going to come in and try and pound the ball. And if Toronto, for the second week in a row, is going to commit members of the defensive secondary to stop the run, if they're going to bring in Cresden Butler on run blitzes, bring in those halfbacks to try and stop the run, then I'm going to make sure I've got man beaters installed, concepts that involve pick routes, some spikes where like spike releases where because of their waggle, players are crossing like right at the snap of the ball, right at the line of scrimmage. And in man coverage, it's really tough to know which guy you're picking up. It's going to put pressure on the DBs to communicate back and forth. And I want to see a lot of those mid-range routes, stuff that's just behind those run stoppers. I think that's probably stuff that we didn't see Winnipeg do a lot this week, but that will be their plan if they can't run. If Toronto's going to play the same game plan as last week, which they probably won't, but if they do, this is the answer to it. And if they don't, then I believe Winnipeg can run the football. And so that would be my plan. How do you approach this game as the Winnipeg defensive coordinator?
Well, I wouldn't overthink it. I think that they had a great defensive game plan. I thought that they did a terrific job. I mean, they allowed 100 plus yards running, but who cares, right? I mean, if you win the game 20-7, it's not fantasy football; it's football. I wouldn't change very much. I thought that they knocked down passes. I thought that you might see them bring a little more heat on passing downs. I thought that Calgary had more success bringing heat, bringing an overload on passing downs that Winnipeg didn't do as much. They seemed pretty happy with the decent pressure they were getting with 4. I wouldn't be surprised to see them heat up Arbuckle and see what he has early. I would keep it the same. I think that you sit on those underneath passes and you simply punish the wide receivers if the quarterback's not going to, get it in there on the line. The lack of a deep threat really is fantastic from a defensive point of view, because if we can bring that safety down into the box, or if we don't have to worry about playing cover 2 or cover 1 back there, that's a huge advantage. So, I would continue to disrespect the Argos deep game until proven otherwise. The Argos had some decent off-tackle runs, so maybe mix in a little more zone early on to try and get the secondary involved in shutting down the running game, because a lot of that stuff wasn't up the middle, right? It was they were able to get the D tackle sealed inside, and they were able to get some decent runs. So I would guess that the DC is going to try and have a little more corner flat zone support in run, which will take away some of those runs, because it wasn't a question of them dominating the the defensive line and blowing up big holes. I thought that White had some terrific off tackle runs, but that's not as hard to stop as, say, if we were getting runs up the middle. And then that's a personnel issue. This is more a tactical issue. So I'm expecting to see Winnipeg come out and be more aggressive defensively against the Argos and their new quarterback. I think O'Shea, he loves coming home, and I think that team is fired up, and I think they are going to come out, blitzing the heck out of the Argos and seeing what they got.
So one thing that you said, as I now transition to Toronto offensive coordinator, one thing you said bothers me. I really wish the Argonauts had a deep threat, because it does, it limits you. And as I'm sort of thinking about strategy, and I was thinking about this earlier today, and what I would do in Dinwiddie and in Coach Jackson's shoes. That deep threat, the lack of the deep threat really limits things. And it's not like these guys can't run for deep balls, that they can, but it's not the same as having a 4-2 guy that can just blaze the top off of a defense and back everybody up. Because it felt last week like Toronto was playing in the red zone all the time. It just felt like there was this 20-yard box that they were trying to play offense in, and it's no good. It doesn't help that Winnipeg's getting home with a 4-man pass rush, because it means you can drop 8 guys into coverage. Because I didn't think there were missed opportunities over the top. It'll be, it's going to be great to watch this week, because not having to rely on the TV coverage, being able to see it live, I'm going to be able to see the coverages better. I can see the cushion that's being given. I can see what's happening in the secondary, and that's not something I've been able to do in those first 2 weeks. So I'm excited about that. But the impression I got from watching that game last week was that Winnipeg was playing over the top for the most part. There was, there was a lot of man, but there was help. It was never like there was a threat of guys getting deep and Bethel Thompson or Arbuckle just missing it, other than that one double move play that we've talked extensively about. But I didn't think that was, it just wasn't there as an opportunity. And then the mid-range stuff also wasn't there, because they didn't have to commit those linebackers to the pass rush. So I think the key to the Argonauts this week, and what I would do, is I am going to focus on center things around the run, but not necessarily off the bat. I think Winnipeg is a very proud defensive unit that is very embarrassed about having let up over 9 yards a carry last week. That's not something they're accustomed to. And I also don't think this is as good a run defending team as they were last year. Hamilton didn't exactly exploit them. They barely ran the ball, but they were down pretty well. They scored the first touchdown, and then the wheels fell off, and they were coming from behind. So they didn't really run the ball that much, especially in the second half. I don't know how much they've been tested and how good they are. And so that's sort of, I think, in my back pocket. But what I'm going to open with is I'm going to count on an aggressive run defense start from the Blue Bombers. And I'm going to open up with a lot of play action, a lot of RPOs, things where I can take advantage of Arbuckle's comfort in the system and maybe hit some of those quick passes over the middle, in behind where those blitzing backers had come from. High-low concepts on the safety, who I think is going to probably be left alone center field. Things that are going to take advantage of over pursuit. I think we might get some misdirection in there too. I would love to see some misdirection using 2 backs, using end arounds, which I know haven't worked at all to this point in the season. Every end around Toronto has run has gone for a loss, I think. But those are the kinds of things that I do think will be successful early on. And then once you've got Winnipeg second guessing the game plan, once they're backed up, now I think you do run. But the key is you can't be behind. We saw last week the run was working so well, but so what when it's 20-7? That doesn't do you any good. There's no time. You can't run at that point anymore. You have to completely throw it out the window. So my offensive game plan, open with play action, open with RPOs, open with that smart quarterback decision making that we're expecting to see from Arbuckle. And then once Winnipeg backs off and sort of calls off the dog and is just sending a 4-man pass rush, now that's when you hit them with the run and hope that it's there like it was last week. That's my game plan. What do you do for Toronto defensively, JB? What is your defensive coordinator's game plan for this week?
Yeah, I think similar to your belief about Winnipeg being a proud team defensively. I think that offensive line is not going to be very happy. The offensive line absolutely dominated short downs. So it was a weird dynamic where the offensive line absolutely blew the defensive line backwards on short yardage situations, but somehow we're not, as successful in the run game. So I think from a defensive point of view, I think they need to dial back the focus on the run. I think that it was good. I like it. I think that you should run blitz, but I don't think you can do that to the detriment of allowing the quarterback to throw for 300 yards at an 80% clip. You're not going to win football games letting a quarterback put those stats up. So you do have to find a way to balance, running so much at zero, and also trying to control some of the run game. I really want them to try and bait Collaros into more deep throws. I think that he is a guy that you can trick. They almost tricked him on that terrific play where they brought the backside corner in on a sort of a cover one situation. I thought more of that is what I would like to see. I think that he is a guy who's going to turn the ball over. He's a gunslinger. So I would continue to focus on not allowing him to roll right out of the pocket. And I would continue on ball hawking because he's going to give you the ball. You just have to go get it. I think that's what I would really hope they would do, is a little more, especially in passing downs. Give him looks where he, tempt him because he wants to throw the ball, and we've got the secondary to go get it. So I would love to see that. I would love to see more focus on daring him to throw the deep ball.
I felt like both offensively and defensively last week, the Toronto Argonauts couldn't catch a break. The beautiful things they did from a coaching standpoint, there was one that really stood out on offense, one that really stood out on defense, and neither worked. And it was one of those things. I'm sure Coach Dinwiddie, Jackson, and Young were thinking about this all night after the game last week, and probably have had some sleepless hours since thinking about this. But the plays I'm talking about defensively, that play you just mentioned, where Jamal Peters basically baits Collaros into that deep middle post, that was being set up the whole game with those Cresden Butler run blitzes. Cresden kept coming in on those run blitzes, and every time they had a post route called or a route adjustment that turned into a post when the safety abandoned the middle of the field, Collaros kept going to it deep and got a touchdown off of it, got another couple huge plays out of it. And then they bait him perfectly. The play call couldn't have been better. There's a route adjustment on the post. Cresden abandons the middle of the field, but Jamal Peters has rolling coverage and is actually got deep middle there. He comes over, and it should have been a pick, and he'd already had a pick in the game. It hits him in the hands. It was just a gorgeous play calling moment for Coach Young, but it was for naught. It was still a great incompletion, but man, that would have been potentially a game-changing interception.
And I think that's going to be there. I mean, I think that's going to be there. I think I think you give him different looks. You give him man and he thinks it's zone, and you give him two and he thinks it's three. I think it's there. It just is going to require you to be able to be more exotic in how you disguise what you're doing back there.
I do want to see more rolling coverage like that. Like I think this is a secondary that can do that stuff. It's difficult, and you risk a blown assignment on coverage like that. That's the gamble with it, is that it's much harder. But I think this is a group that has proven they're ready for more exotic stuff back there instead of just sitting on zero with the occasional cover one. We just didn't see too much else unless it was a run blitz.
Yeah, and we need less zero. Got to have less zero.
I know you're not a fan of that. I'm okay.
Well,
I think we got the guys.
Collaros,
I don't know, but those two touchdowns though.
Unless you're going to bait him more.
I guess so. That first one that was so close to being incomplete. Shaq Richardson had his hand on the ball as the receiver was going to ground in the end zone. He almost pulled it out.
Full credit to Winnipeg. Like I talked about, like their receivers are really, really good at contested catches. I'm really impressed with how well they fight for the ball and how well they're able to come down with the catch. In their first game too, watching that film, they are really an impressive group when it comes to contested catches.
And just to finish the thought on the offensive genius that didn't come through was Coach Dinwiddie setting up that little hitch and go that Tavares Daniels and McLeod Bethel Thompson couldn't quite connect on. When I went back to look at the film from that, I didn't realize how many times in the game Tavares, from that same look, that quads to the field, Tavares is on the boundary side, it's just him, and he kept running these 10-yard digs like again and again and again. They hit him on a couple. He ran a couple where he didn't get looks. And for sure, there was a call from the booth basically saying that the boundary corner was ready. He's starting to gamble on these. And that's when, and you can see it too on I did a film piece on this that you can check out on xsandargos.com as well. And it's on our YouTube channel. But you can actually see McLeod Bethel Thompson reminding Tavares Daniels in the huddle that he's got the double move now. And I know for sure, I guarantee that came from Coach Dinwiddie on the sideline, or Coach Jackson, one of the two, whoever's got headset communication there, said to him, don't remind Tavares, he's got the double move, because they had set it up so beautifully. And just like with that rolling coverage with Jamal Peters, it didn't connect. And those are crushing, things that you can't recover from when you're playing against a team like Winnipeg. You have to hit on those.
Well, I mean, that play ended in my opinion, that play ended the Macbeth era. And I think that Arbuckle is the quarterback moving forward, barring injury.
Oh, I'm sure it did. Like, I'm sure Coach Dinwiddie wanted to break his clipboard over McLeod Bethel Thompson's head after that, because it was just so beautifully scripted, and it's just you can't miss. You can't miss on that. That's what we've been waiting for. All right, the things we want to see, JB. What do you want to see from the Argos this week? Yours came through last week. You wanted to see a rushing touchdown. You got your rushing touchdown, JB.
I thought if we got a rushing touchdown, that that would signify that we are rolling. But the pass game just disappeared. I mean, who knew? Who knew that they were going to be unable to throw the ball and catch it? But I was happy to see that running touchdown. I was happy to see White. I thought he had real burst. I thought that he looked. I think he caught him by surprise. To be honest, I don't think they thought he was that good. And
he sets up his blocks really well, and I didn't realize how good he was at that.
Yeah, I think he had more burst and more wiggle than he certainly looked like he had more than he did in game one. So if I was surprised, I'm guessing that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers were also surprised.
So you're saying you want to see a passing touchdown this week?
No. I'm what I would love to see, which is an area that I want the Argos to work on all year, is I want to see first quarter scoring. The statistics are pretty stark that essentially teams that are winning after the first quarter win 75% of their games. And same goes for halftime. So it's an incredible number. It's vital that you get out in front. And I think especially against Winnipeg, which is a team built to play with the lead. They're not going to come in and blow you out. They want the lead, and once they have the lead, they're a problem to play against because they are so physical and so disciplined, and they will just crush you if you're trying to catch up to them. And so I'm looking for 10 points in the first quarter from the Argos. I think it should be an absolute coaching key, and I think from a team point of view, it is vital to go out there and not spend the first quarter getting warmed up. Go get 10 points in that first quarter. It's what good teams do, bluntly put.
What I'm looking to see is I want to see this team act like they're playing on their home field. I want this to look like a team with confidence, the team that is playing like this is where we play, this is our building, we're going to protect this place. They've talked about that this week in press conferences. They've talked about how they're excited to defend their turf. And there is something to that psychologically. It's a weird thing, the idea of playing well at home when your fans are there and there's something that goes back sort of hundreds of years there. I think it feels very medieval in a way, but that it has to feel like that. This has to be a place that people don't want to come in and play. And it starts with the team. The fans will respond. And I expect it to be pretty close to the allowed sellout number, which is 15,000. I think it's going to be right there. And the people that are going to this game are your diehards. These are the people that have been waiting to see their Toronto Argonauts play at home for 665 days. And they can't wait to yell and scream. And this team needs to give them a reason to do that. This needs to feel like a home game. And that's what I want to see. A team that is playing like they're playing at home. And the crowd will back them up. They'll respond.
And I think the team's going to be confident. I mean, I know it was 20-7, but the score doesn't really mean anything. We were right there. I mean, the Argos were right there in that game. They did not get pushed around. They did not get dominated by probably the best team in the CFL. So those guys have to feel good that you take away a fumble, you take away an interception, you convert a couple of plays, and that game is there. Now, there's a danger in always thinking that way, but I think that the team is going to feel confident coming into this second game that they can match up with the Blue Bombers. So I'm really excited to see if they have another gear, because for sure Winnipeg does. So, I think that's going to be interesting to see.
Give me your prediction, JB. We're 1-1, I believe, both of us. What's your prediction for this week?
I can't not pick the Argos in the home opener. I think that although I'm often cautiously optimistic and to pick against the Argos 2 weeks in a row, I am going to pick the Argos. I think that this is a bigger game for them than it is Winnipeg, and I think that they are going to be ready to compete. I mean, I hope from an injury point of view, I'm already hedging here, that they are close to go. If Harris comes back and he's fully healthy, that's going to be a problem as well. But I'm going to say Argos 27, Winnipeg 24.
What? That's my exact prediction. That's the same prediction that I gave with Darren Bombing yesterday in my scouting report. But that's fine if you would like to copy my prediction. That's
luckily,
fair.
As you know, I never watch any of your videos.
That's true. That's the only reason I know you're not copying me is that you never watch or read anything I do. So that's cool. I'm not bitter about it though. I don't think about it every day. But yeah, that's my prediction. I think it's going to be a close game. It should be. Regardless of the outcome, it should be close. And I think the Argonauts are going to prevail. I think home field will be a big part of that too. So Argos 27, Blue Bombers 24. Well, that will just about do it for the walkthrough on this week's edition of the X's and Argos podcast. If you haven't had a chance to check out our stuff, we've had a lot of great stuff on the website all week. Check it out at xsandargos.com. And if you've got some time, please rate the podcast on your podcast app. Subscribe as well, so it shows up right there on your phone. So you don't even need to know what day it is. It just pops up right there, and we'll keep you in tune with when the games are, what's going on, all the news, all the latest, everything Argos that you need to think about. For JB, my name is Ben Grant, saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see you.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe.